Hey there, it's Jillian, and I'm coming to you today to go over adding and subtracting fractions. We're going to start with fractions. So here's the deal. Sometimes when people hear the words fractions or decimals, they start to sweat. They start to freak out, especially if you cannot put it in your calculator. Oh my. Here's the deal, guys. Stop making a problem where a problem doesn't have to exist. If you think it's a problem for you to add or subtract fractions, stop telling yourself that story and let's tell ourselves another story. That this is not a big deal. Let me show you what to do and then just do that. Okay? Now you know how to divide things up into fractions. You know if you've ever had pizza before and you order one pizza and there are 6 slices and you have 3 people, you're going to divide the pizza of 6 slices into 3 people, and that means each person's going to have, right, 2 pieces each. 2, 4, 6, which is why, again, we need to learn to count in 2s, 3s, and 4s, like I said in a previous video. So here we know that if we have, I want you to follow that, see if you can follow this for a second. I'm just going to draw something here. So let's say you've got this pizza and you cut this in half. That means this here is half, right? Now, if I go like this, do you see how everything here that was a half, it's still a half, but when you look at it from a quarters perspective, there are 2 quarters in this half. So a half is the same as 2 quarters. And if I cut it into eighths, 2, 4, 6, 8, everything in this half is 1, 2, 3, 4, 4/8. These are all the same. Remember, math is a language. You learned how to say in Spanish, hola and hello, in French, bonjour and hello. Pardon my accent. However, you get the idea. They are literally equal the same. They are simply just different ways of saying the same thing. Same thing here. 1/2 is the same as 2 quarters, is the same as 4/8. Okay? Now, let's take a look at this. If 1/2 is the same as 2 quarters, well, what could we do to literally make this a half using arithmetic? Not pictures, but arithmetic. Well, we know that there's a rule with fractions that when you are reducing fractions, and there will be many fractions that you reduce in your high school math career. So if you think you're going to avoid it, suck it up, buttercup. You're not going to. You're going to have to learn how to do this. So what we do, what the rule is if there's a number that evenly divides into both the number in the numerator and in the denominator, then we can divide that number in and reduce our fraction. So for example, in this case, there is a number 2 that divides into this number and into this number evenly. So if we take this number and divide it by 2, and we do the same to the bottom and the top, which is the rule, then we know that 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2, and of course a half is equal to a half. We know this. Let's see about 4/8. So for 4/8, we have here 4/8. Is there a number that divides equally with no remainder into 4 and into 8? Yes, there's a couple of them. 2 goes into both of them, but 2 isn't the largest number. If you see that it's 2, you can do 2, but then there's another step. Try to always find the largest number that goes into, let me write that down for you visual people, the largest number that goes into, divides into each of these numbers, the one in the numerator and in the denominator, evenly, no remainder. So what's the number? Of course, you know your times table, so you know that 4 goes into 4 once, and 4 goes into here twice, and just as we knew, 4/8 is the same as a half. So that's equivalent fractions for a moment. Now let's take a look at this. Seeing as we now have had a tiny reminder on how to do equivalent fractions, I'm going to show you or remind you how to add and subtract fractions. Now, adding and subtracting fractions are the same. If it's add, it means you add them, and if it's a subtraction, you subtract them. But here are the steps. Number one, you want to make sure that you have a common denominator. If you do not have the same number downstairs, as I call it, you cannot add or subtract the numbers upstairs. The first rule is you must. This is not optional. This is like sometimes it's a good idea. You must have the same number in both denominators. So in this case we do, and when we do, we simply just write that denominator down, and then we do whatever the numerator says to do with the operation. So this says 1 plus 5, so we get 1 plus 5 is 6. Then we reduce our fraction. Is there any way? Sometimes you can't reduce your fraction, but you always try to reduce your fraction. So let's see here. Can we reduce this fraction? Well, is there a number that divides equally into 2 and 6? Yeah, 2. So 2 goes into 6 3 times, and 2 goes into itself once. And then we know that any number over 1 is just equal to that number. Now let's just go back to our pizza example for a second. So this says if we have a half and we have 5 halves, we have a total of 3. So let me draw it out in pizzas for you for a second. Okay? So it says that we have 3 pizzas. So let's draw 3 pizzas and see if we can piece this together. So I'm going to cut them all into halves because that's what the denominator is. And I'm just going to do it this one time to show you, and then we're just going to do the arithmetic in a moment. So here, if you have 1 half, that's this bit. There's 1 half. This says 5 halves. So here's 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves. And indeed, you have 3 full pizzas when you have 1 half of a pizza, and then you add another 5 halves. Okay. So that's it, guys. This is it. This is what you need to do. So now let's go to the next question. Here, we don't have a common denominator, so we're going to find a common denominator. What number, if we multiply this number by something, can we get this number? And then we check. If we multiply this number by something, can we get this number? So in this case, if we multiply this by 2, we know we get 4. And if we multiply this by 2, whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top, because remember, we just did all of that equivalent fractions business, and we know that 1 over 2 equals 2 over 4 equals 4 over 8, 10 over 20, 100 over 200, all of them equal a half. So you can rewrite this as an equivalent fraction with a 4 at the bottom. And if we do that, let me just write this out here. This is not going to change. If we make this a 4, that means we multiplied by 2. We don't ever add, like don't think you added 2 or anything like that, because you only do multiplying here. If we multiply this by 2, well, whatever we do to the bottom, we must do to the top. So if we multiply the bottom by 2, we multiply the top by 2, and now that's 2 times 1, which is 2. And now we have a common denominator, so we can do what we did here. We put the denominator, and then we do the operation. 2 plus 1 is 3. So the answer of a half plus a quarter is 3/4. Let's do this one now. Here, is there a way to make this number this or this number this? Yes. We can double this, and then they're both 6. So let's do that. Again, I think you're starting to see I wasn't joking when I said you better know your times tables really, really well. If you want to just have this flow off you, no problem. So here I multiplied this by 2, so I have to do the same to the top. And now I have the same denominator, and then I do the operation. 4 plus 1 is 5. Boom. Okay, now what about this situation here? This can't be this, and this can't be this. The way we multiplied this by 2 and they were the same. So now we have to figure out what is the smallest number. It'll be bigger than these two, but what's the smallest number that is going to that both of these go into evenly? Well, the smallest number is 6. So let's see, what did we do to 3 to get 6? We multiplied it by 2, so we have to multiply this by 2. What did we do to this to get 6? We multiplied by 3, so we have to multiply this by 3. And then we can copy down the denominator and do the operation. All right, let's do this one. Here we've got 5 and 7. Okay, well, what do 5 and 7 both go into? Evenly. Whoops. They go into 35. So 5 times what is 35? 7. So if we multiply the bottom by 7, have to do the same to the top. 7 times 1 is 7. Then here, what do we multiply 7 by to get 35? We multiplied by 5. So we have to multiply the top by 5, and 5 times 2 is 10. Then we do the operation, put the denominator, and we're done. Make sure you can do this. You can pick any question. You can just go randomly. You can just say, okay, I'm going to, let's do a subtraction one, and I'm going to pick, I don't know, 6, 9, 1, and 2. I'm going to do 5 over 6 and 2 over 9. Okay, just randomly pick numbers. So now, let's see here. These are not the same. Now, what is the lowest number that these both go into? So we know that 9 times 6 is 54, but there's a number that's smaller that both of them divide into evenly. What's the number? Well, let's see. Do you know? It's 18. So now we've got 6 times what is 18? 6 times 3. So this times 3 is 15. 9 times what is 18? 9 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. And then we do the operation. We write the denominator. 15 minus 4 is 11. And we are done. Practice, 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 practice.